Welcome to Mindset Mastery Moments, the best growth mindset podcast recognized by Million Podcasts and ranked as a top mindset podcast by FeedSpot. We're proud to be in the top 1% on Listen Notes. Join Dr. Alisa White as we explore powerful insights and strategies to elevate your mindset. Let's dive in.
Hello, disruptors. Well, today's conversation, this is one that is about innovation, equity, and what happens when we finally decide that opportunity should belong to everyone. Joining me are two global leaders who are changing the narrative on entrepreneurship and access, Dr. John Bamforth and Dr. Roy Zwahlen, co-authors of the groundbreaking new book, Race to Innovation, Unleashing the Power of Entrepreneurship for Everyone, published by Idea Press. Together, they're pulling back the curtain on what they call America's innovation deficit and how unleashing the power of diversity can change not just the marketplace, but the mindset of a nation. This conversation is so powerful, we had to split it into two parts. In the first episode, we unpack what innovation really means, why potential often goes unnoticed, and the incredible role communities, or what they call enclaves, play in fueling innovation for generations to come. Let's dive into the Race to Innovation, part one. I'll see you on the inside. Let's go. Hello, visionaries, and welcome back to another phenomenal episode of Mindset Mastery Moments. I'm your host of Coach, Dr. Alisa White, and today's episode is going to stretch how you think about innovation. Listen, entrepreneurship, and inclusion, because we're diving into what it truly means to unleash the power of innovation for everyone. And I must emphasize the word everyone. I am joined by two incredible thought leaders, Dr. John Bamforth and Dr. Roy Zwahlen, co-authors of the book, Race to Innovation, Unleashing the Power of Entrepreneurship for Everyone, from Idea Press, that was published and released in September of this year, 2025. Between the two of them, we're talking about decades of global experience, from leading billion-dollar pharmaceutical brands and breakthrough innovations at UNC Chapel Hill, to shaping the global strategy behind Echelon Innovation. Gentlemen, I am so excited to welcome you to the show. It's our honor to have you both here, Dr. Roy and Dr. John. Please tell us in your own words who you are and what you do and why you're so passionate about this subject.
Zwahlen. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Echelon Innovation, and I'm Associate Dean here at UNC Chapel Hill. My background, I'm an attorney by training, and so that was kind of where I started, and have spent my career really thinking about and driving innovation ecosystems, first in the trade association, and then came here to UNC almost a decade ago to really help build one. And so I'm passionate about this topic, not just because it's innovation and entrepreneurship, which I've spent a lot of time thinking about and trying to build, but in particular, the inclusion piece, as you leaned in on, Dr. Alisa, that this is about unlocking potential in everybody around us, right? And that's where the innovation magic happens. And I'm passionate about this because we have this vision of this Iron Man solo entrepreneur archetype, and the reality is very different, right? This happens, entrepreneurship happens together, and that entrepreneurship journey is much stronger when we can really leverage each other's strengths and build together. John.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Roy. So I'm the old guy in the room with you youngsters. So
the wisdom.
I'm well, no, old, no wisdom, just old. So originally from England, and pharmacist, PhD. I went into the pharma industry, worked for a company called Eli Lilly for about 30 years, all in certainly the vast majority of it growing global businesses, and so became super passionate not just about innovation, but building diverse teams. And when I say diverse teams, I mean globally diverse teams, not just here with a US lens,
right?
Bringing folks in from all over the world. And then retired from Lilly, and then came to UNC for the last 6 years and was the executive director of the institute focused on innovation at the UNC Chapel Hill, working with Roy. So that's me.
Awesome. So we've got packed in this episode. So much wisdom, expertise, misfires, and all of the things. Who better to tell us? So here's my question to take us right off. We're talking about why this book? Why now? You know, what really stood out to me early in the book was this phrase. You all said, America's innovation deficit. And I'm like, okay, someone else sees it. That really hit me because we talk a lot about tech gaps and opportunity gaps, but you're saying innovation itself, there's a deficit that exists. Dr. Roy, I'd love to start with you on that. What do you mean by an innovation deficit, and how do we start to close it?
Yeah, I think in particular, you have to think about trajectory of our country versus other countries right now. And what I mean by that, the United States has been a clear leader. It still is, right? There is pound for pound startup creation, venture capital. And so we're being a bit provocative, but we're worried about the trajectory of the country as it relates to innovation strategy. It is somewhat haphazard right now. It's somewhat reactive. And if you look at countries around the world, they're being very intentional with their R&D strategy, with their innovation strategy at the national level. Regions and states are doing something similar, and it's starting to feel like the U.S. is falling behind. We see it in kind of in the China-U.S. politics. If you start looking at what China has done just in the last decade and key strategic sectors, right, you'll hear that from the U.S. government. There's a lot of concern about where they are, and like AI and other key areas where we feel like we're starting to fall behind. And for us, I think because of our global experiences and thinking about teams, we are, I think strategically, we first lean into strengths, and part of that strength is our diversity, right? And the talent that comes from all over the world, and even that talent that is homegrown is very diverse in and of itself in every sense of that word, intellectually, from a training perspective, culturally, lived experiences, etc. And we haven't figured out how to unlock that. We haven't figured out how to leverage that. It is, we kind of just let a few winners kind of move forward, and we're happy with that. But we think that's a lost opportunity and a really interesting place for us as a country to strategically differentiate ourselves to actually win the race again to innovation and keep moving.
I mean, yes, I love that. I'm going to hop over before I get my comments in to Dr. John, because you've seen firsthand how global organizations rise and stall based on diversity of ideas in the room. What are your thoughts on the deficit and how America can really position ourselves to be advantageous in that space when it comes to innovation?
Yeah, I fall back on my experiences in corporate America, and when I think of the company that I work for, which is now the biggest pharma company in the world from a market cap perspective, and has driven innovation, obesity, and all these drugs that everybody's talking about right now.
Right.
The frame for us, while we were based in Indianapolis, Indiana, which you think about, the good old Midwest, we were truly global organization based in 130 countries around the world, and we were leveraging the best talent from around the world, no matter where they came from.
Yes.
And we were bringing them to Indy, and we were putting them in teams. And my lived experience is one of this, these remarkable events that would happen in teams. The teams, and there's lots of data to support this, Alisa. The teams were more innovative. They performed better. And I remember the current CEO, Dave, and I running sessions in Lilly, and we would get pushback sometimes on our conversations around diversity, like we're seeing in the US right now. And we would say, guys, this is not about being politically correct. Okay. This is about being competitive.
Yes.
And this is about, we know the data supports the fact if we have diverse teams working on this problem, that we're going to get unique solutions to those challenges from diverse teams.
Yes.
It was a business imperative for us in the company, not something because, it was the right thing politically to do.
Right.
That was never the lens. That was never the lens. And that's not the lens in the book.
Yes. This is why I believe this conversation and this book is so important. Because I chuckle, you see me chuckling as you speak when you say it was never the lens. I'm just so appalled at the masses being so I don't know what diversity means. It's like every time people hear diversity, they think about race, and that's not it. That is just not it. Like, that is so far from diversity. So I'm not going to take the wheel. This is your expertise. Can either of you or both of you, I'd love to hear from both of you, how you simply, we have the textbook definition. You can give us that if you want, but I'd love to hear for the laymen and women and just everyday people, what truly is diversity, and how important is it in everything we do in life to get the best. If you are an entrepreneur, if you are someone who I would say you just want to be excellent in everything you do, why is diversity so important? What is it?
Roy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll take an innovation lens to that questions because we kind of pull those two words together in this sense. And
Yes.
the classic simplified definition of innovation is novelty that has value, right? Novelty that has value to other. And so when you hear John talking before about, hey, this is about, problem solving, this is about getting to the most valuable position for people, for customers, for anybody that finds value, then that diversity of thought or that diversity of lived experience or culture or training, those things are assets, right? I think we often think about diversity in the lens of justice, which in a legal frame, as a trained attorney, I understand that. And I understand the politics of that, but we're not discussing that from our lens. That's right. This is about how do we actually innovate for our future and what are we leaving behind by not having a broader lens than just our own lived experience or cultural training. That's what the diversity piece that we're trying to leverage within an innovation framework. John?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'd add, in the book we have 5 principles that we identified as we were doing the research with the team that we had. And one of those principles is that, having a unique lens. And what we mean by that is a unique lens on a problem. And, that to layer on what Roy was talking about. And, the reality is if you've got people coming from a diverse background, they have unique lenses on issues, right? So one of the examples we use in the book is a modern day example with Rihanna. And, everybody thinks about her as a singer.
Right.
But she has made the majority of her net worth from identifying an opportunity in the cosmetic space.
Yes.
Because she realized there were a whole raft of people unserved by the corporate America that were producing makeup for the masses.
Right.
But there was actually an incredibly massive opportunity for customers who needed makeup that didn't look like the majority.
Exactly.
And she's a billionaire. She's a billionaire because of that.
Because of it. Yes.
So because of it, she had a unique lens. She decided to leverage, people knew who she was as well because of her music career.
It helped.
But she had a unique lens on a problem. And it's those sorts of opportunities that we think, going back to the initial question around, the opportunity for the United States to do something a little bit different. Those are those opportunities we think that are sitting there for us to take.
I love it. And let's just face it. I just did a presentation yesterday for a few hundred youths in Nigeria, specifically speaking to them about mastering the entrepreneurial mindset. Basics of what you just said, Dr. John, is what problem is it that you solve and uniquely looking at it. And a lot of times those problems are not problems that belong to someone else. As an entrepreneur, it's the problem that might be the problem that you're experiencing. And this is where the opportunity
100%.
presents itself. So that's just so powerful because what you both are describing, honestly, is that innovation isn't lacking talent. It's lacking access, trust, and intentional inclusion, right? So that's what I'm grasping from it. One of the principles in the book that I underlined about 5 times was the words recognize potential. You make the point that entrepreneurship is rooted in discovering what's been overlooked and underappreciated. Dr. John, let's start with you here. How can leaders or investors get better at recognizing the potential that's right in front of them, especially in communities that have historically been underestimated?
Yeah, and I think, particularly while race is part of the story,
it's not the whole story.
Only one dimension. Right?
Exactly.
And we always choose the example, and there's a specific example I'll talk about. But these concepts apply as much to rural white America
Yes.
as they do to the African American community or the Native American. You pick it. It doesn't really matter which community.
Exactly.
Basically, we're saying go to communities that we don't normally go to
Right.
for innovation, and you'll find opportunity.
Exactly.
And to use one example, we were given some funding by the North Carolina State House from the first wave of opioid settlement funds. And we took that money as a team to Western North Carolina, who were dealing with the opioid crisis on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And we dug in and partnered with them and pulled out what they'd learned about the crisis by dealing with these patients who were addicted to opioids on a daily basis, and where were the opportunities to innovate and solve the problem. And they came up with, in fact, they'd already come up with the concept. We basically brought it to life in a digital health company that we started. But they identified that there was a tech opportunity to surround patients with care enabled by tech. And that company, which now supplies services to patients who have gone through an overdose, is first of all saving lives today, which is the most important thing, saving patients' lives who have had an opioid overdose. But more importantly, it is growing rapidly because it's such a successful solution. And it's broadening its impact in communities across the country. That idea came from the community who were dealing with the problem. That wasn't somebody in Chapel Hill coming, oh, what do we think the solution is? No, we went to the people who were dealing with this every day. And they had the solutions.
Exactly.
We had to help them think it through. We were doing design thinking, etc.
Right. And
they had the solutions in their hands. We just helped them bring it to life.
Exactly.
So in my mind, that's the frame. And this is piece around potential. We generally people often go to the same places for solutions. We're saying is basically there are solutions across the country we're not even looking at right now, and that's an opportunity in itself.
And that's, to me, that is the bread and butter of the way any successful innovator, entrepreneur, sometimes for me one and the same, thinks, right? Dr. Roy, I want to have your take on this too, because you come at it from a strategic and an ecosystem type perspective. What are we missing when we fail to see what's already there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple frames. I'll maybe highlight one that was kind of striking to me as both in our own work and just in general is this frame of enabling ownership. So oftentimes, people get excited and we say, okay, great. Like you've convinced us, let's go to Western North Carolina and start a company, or let's go to a particular community or engage on academic campuses. And we get in there and we forget about this enabling ownership principle that is key to success. And what I mean by that is enabling the ownership of the people that are co-creating with you.
Yes.
A quick story that we love is the story of Joe Louis and his title defense against Max Schmeling. And that, of course, is Hitler's boxer. So this is the late 1930s. Joe Louis is doing a title defense and he wins and becomes a national hero. And this is the build up to World War II. And so he became that symbol of American pride across communities, even with the racial tensions of the time. He was clearly loved by others. He approached, after he retired, he approached the Ford company to try to buy a dealership in Chicago and to run, to sell cars, which for us, a sports figure selling things is very common. That's kind of obvious for us. It may not have been so obvious in those days, but in any case, he was denied the opportunity to do that solely on the basis of race. The other owners of Ford dealerships were not comfortable with a black man owning a Ford dealership, and he was denied that opportunity. Max Schmeling in Germany was given the Coca-Cola franchise, and he died rich in Germany, and Joe Louis died poor. These stories you can see fast forward through sports, and you see modern day athletes are actually entrepreneurs and investors. Shaquille O'Neal got into Google pre-IPO, right? We have George Foreman and the Foreman Grill, right? And that company, all these people have learned the lessons of understanding the value they create and capturing ownership. And I think as partners on the other side, which we see ourselves as, it's being thoughtful about that, whether you're venture capital, whether you're like us, we're kind of ecosystem enablers or bringing programs. How do we actually enable ownership in that community or for the people that have that expertise around the problem? And what that does is not only kind of right or wrong, but it actually really aligns interests and incentives. And those communities we found have engaged even more with us because they they understand we are trying to do this together as partners. We're not just coming in with a solution. We're not just coming in thinking we know everything. We are coming in because we have expertise that is complementary to them, and we're in this together. And that ownership piece underlines all of it.
I have a new favorite story of ownership as well.
Tell us.
Because it's very recent.
Tell us.
So Seth Trimble, who was playing basketball last night for UNC against the Jayhawks, and we beat Kansas for the first time in 23 years. It was a big night. Seth was playing point guard. Well, Seth with the transformation of college sport and NIL, has been able to garner some financial return from his time in college sports. He is now the youngest Ben & Jerry's franchise owner in the country because he bought the franchise on Franklin Street here in Chapel Hill. So we're on a journey to change.
Yes.
We're seeing it in things like successful athletes, but it's broader than that. And we've got to continue to drive what Roy was talking about there, because I think that transformational change will be pretty radical when it happens.
Exactly. I love those examples. Just a little bit on my own. A lot of individuals, I guess more people see me more as a podcaster, but obviously I speak, coach, and I train. That's where I started. And the podcast is just an additional piece, an extension of me adding value to the world. And it just evolved over time. But I always tell individuals I'm first an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur that speaks, coaches, lectures and all that, but I'm an entrepreneur. But beneath the entrepreneurial journey is, at my core, I'm a teacher. And so when people think about me, they would never guess that looking at some of the hurricanes and disaster things that's happened infrastructurally across the globe, that in the last year, I've gotten involved in looking at the cement industry and how I can blend the thought of bringing humanitarian aid, but also from a business investment perspective and bringing a group of people. And I keep working on that. And I know that, within a year or so, it will realize and it will become. But that is something that a lot of people would never think of. But with my work and what I do on the humanitarian side, it also supports my entrepreneurial space, and I get to be a voice in spaces that people never think, oh, you're just a keynote speaker. But think about what I talk about. I'm always talking about entrepreneurship. I'm always talking about socioeconomic development and growth and human development. So you people don't see it, the link, but that's the thing behind it. There's always opportunity for you to what you are and why you are, to be in places and spaces that you would never guess, but you must have that open mindset of what am I missing? Who am I missing? Where do I find them? And get curious is what I always encourage people, is get curious about the ideas and thought processes. And I say more so with people who just seem the complete opposite of you. Someone might think, well, what does Alisa in her 40s have in common with a 90-year-old, Caucasian male in Wales? That's the point. I don't know. So I'm going to find out. What does he think about entrepreneurship? What does he think about, humanity at this point? What is his view on the world and business? What did business look like in the 50s, in the 20s? History. I can listen to things that he did and get garnish ideas and thought processes that I did not have, and then borrow them and marry them with what I have and what someone who is 11 years old, who thinks he's the greatest entrepreneur at 11, what he says, my nephew, and bring something together, or bring two people together that can answer and bring a solution to geniuses like yourself and say, you might want to hear what they think. What I learned from them is this. And I think you all can use it for something. And that for me is what innovation is, and why it's so the need is there for us to always get curious, as I would say, of bringing people to the table that you don't think might have value to add. I always say those are the ones you should go for first. Ignore the ones that you think of first, come to them last, and go to the ones you think of last. So let's pivot a little bit to something you both mentioned and I thought was genius, because this word has been popping up in smaller spaces, but you talked about the power of enclaves. And I have an accent, so I say things a little bit different, but you all know what I'm talking about. And I love that you reframe it to not as isolation, but as an innovation engine. Dr. Roy, can you unpack that a bit? What role does enclaves, these communities, these networks, these circuits play in actually helping innovation to thrive?
Yeah, I'm happy to. My favorite story in the book is actually Wilmington, North Carolina. It's the first Black Mecca in the South, at least. It's considered one of the first Black Meccas in the South, and where you saw in the same generation of people being freed from slavery, going from slaves to middle and upper class
Yeah.
in that time frame. And that was because of entrepreneurship. Of course, they started their own businesses, but in particular, they created an enclave with each other. The city was about 55% African American at the time. And, they were able to leverage each other and networks and capital and just the psychological safety even for them to be in that group. And that's, the barriers against them didn't go away. Banking was still incredibly difficult. Other things were challenges. And that's part of why I love the story and why we need to focus on that, I think. In particular, of course, unfortunately, there was a coup d'etat in the city and those Black businesses were burned down and many people were murdered. And not unlike Tulsa, the story in Tulsa, but it had a similar fate. And, as we reflected on those stories, the tragedy, of course, is something we thought deeply about, but something that struck me personally was kind of a halting moment. I was like, well, wait a minute. The tragedy is awful, but how did they go from slavery to upper class in the same generation? Like, what was it about that enclave that moved them forward? What was it in Tulsa where a single dollar went around the Greenwood community in Tulsa 24 times?
Come on.
For those of you that actually track that, I mean, great is like 3 to 4 times, 24 times. And there was no banking in Tulsa for that community.
There was no bank. That's one of the extraordinary things.
24 times, right? And it's because they had angel investors, what we would call today angel investors. They were investing in each other.
Yes.
Right. And so these
they're investing in our community.
Right. These enclaves are critical for success. And it is. And we kind of have to recognize that and understand it and then think about how do we engage if it's not our enclave, right? You're talking to 2 old white men here. So if it's not our enclave, I think the temptation is to say, that's your enclave versus Dr. Alisa, what you just said. So I think in such a great way about individuals and how we need to think about individuals that are different enough than us as places of value. We need to add enclaves to that mix as well, that those enclaves have a lot of talent, have a lot of ideas, and we have to be, it's not exclusionary, right? They often invite you in. We don't feel like we can because, and that's the wrong.
Ooh, that's deep. That's deep. I just got a comment before I switch over to Dr. John. The thing you said is, and this is why I love Mindset Mastery Moments. I love this podcast. And I love the people that come on here and what you represent in the world, because I am always saying, please, whatever problem it is, whatever disaster, whatever tragedy, please ask, what can I learn from this? And don't just go surface level, go deeper and then go deeper and go deeper and bring people with you, right? Because when you just brought that up, it's seldom spoken of, or it probably is, but only in certain circles, the examination of those tragedies, because they're only labeled tragedies commonly. They're not labeled as how can we learn and what worked and what didn't work. And I believe any group, like you said, any community, any village, any enclave can look at those, that what is beneath, what got them to that level of success. We know it hurt. We know it was a tragedy. And even the quote unquote marginalized group in that scenario, let's go do it again. What are you doing? It's been done. Now you can even do it better. Do it better. You've got even more help. You've got more support. And the way you can do it better, and again, I tell people throughout the history of time, anything that we've been able to accomplish that took us forward as a human race did not have just one race, even though the major benefactor might have looked at like a particular group of people. So just understand that. Let's just keep that in mind as we switch over to Dr. John, because we'd love your perspective too, because you lead innovation labs where environment and ecosystems literally make or break ideas. So give us your response to how those enclaves are beneficial to what we're doing as innovators.
I couldn't help but, we were blessed to be invited down to Tulsa, to Black Wall Street, to launch the book. And so, to your point, we were invited in, right? Two white
Beautiful.
dudes and a strange guy from England,
Love it.
invited in to learn about, what actually occurred. There's a very poignant museum in Greenwood, called Greenwood Rising, that we spent some time in with the community. And then Roy and I kind of, some of the community's been rebuilt, not in anywhere close to what Greenwood was, at least right now. And it was, you couldn't help but walk through the streets, and there's lots of art that reflects on what actually happened there. But there is we also visited some present day activities that are going on within Tulsa, and there are flames of I think some pretty exciting things going on in Tulsa right now, particularly in the tech space. They've got Nvidia coming in to the city, and at least what we saw is pretty multicultural. And they were asking us back to help out and all this sort of good stuff. But I think there's probably been enough of a gap of time now to learn from it. To your point, to embrace that learning and say, look, that we're never going to forget what happened.
Right.
We have a very rich museum that's going to tell that story. But now is the opportunity to say, hey, okay, what can we learn from it, and what can we do now that takes Tulsa? What are the unique things here about Tulsa that can allow us to build unique organizations, unique opportunities that can help the city thrive and the state thrive? And I think we saw that, Roy.
Yeah.
I think we saw that in a very rich way when we were there.
And I'm about to say that's so rich because what I'm hearing both of you say is community isn't a crutch. It's a catalyst. It's where courage compounds. And that for me is I just launched a school community for entrepreneurs, call it the Dream Builders think tank. I'd done it before with smaller groups virtually throughout the globe, but I wanted to extend the space where anyone who wants to build, they can help with getting clarity, shifting their mindset, and then if they want to work with me directly or any of the experts on my team. But here's the thing. Everyone was asking me, why is community such a big deal right now? What's happening? Everywhere they're talking about having these school communities, having a community for this, a community for planting gardens, a community for growing carrots. And I feel like that is somewhat of the lean into what you both are representing with the work and where you're at with this book, bringing it to life, is really bringing this catalyst for innovation, right? Any comments that either of you want to give to that? Have you all noted that type of creating virtual communities around subject areas, whether it's paid, free, or just conversational? Any comments in what you see happening across the globe?
Yeah, I'll start. I think inevitably with the speed from a tech perspective and with AI enablement, I think it's I think we've got some pretty unique things going on within the institute right now that the speed that AI has transformed most sectors is remarkable. And I think the piece for us as we sit in a university is we smile when AI first kind of hit probably 18 months ago at a university campus level.
Yeah.
The old folks at the administrative level were a little taken aback by the speed and a little slow, I think, to realize, like all this type of innovation, how quickly, because of the power of the innovation, how quickly it would spread, particularly across the student body. And so, we had some things, Roy and I smiled about, the senior leadership saying, well, you can only use this tool, right? You can only use a Microsoft tool or the Google tool. Well, if you talk to the students, they were all using the latest tool that was launched yesterday,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so what we've done at the Institute is lean in to those students now, all of whom seem to have a side gig, right? They all seem to have their own little AI company that they built,
Wow.
alongside the fact that we're doing their college degree.
Right.
And that is, that what we said at the Institute is like, well, why don't we just bring the students in to help us build these companies? Because they know what the latest tool is in AI. And they're more likely to
Yeah.
know than Roy Zwahlen and John Bamforth, right? And so I think
Really?
that much more likely, I can tell you for sure. In fact, they probably built it. So I think for me, that's the exciting piece around, in particular, college campuses right now, because that's where a lot of the transformations occur. I don't know whether you would agree, Roy.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the other kind of macro thing that's actually, it's really interesting that these things are happening at the same time, because you have, COVID on the other end, right? So you could think of AI as driving individualism, and COVID kind of reminding us of why community is so important, and the shutdowns and all those things. It's an interesting convergence of two things that, quite frankly, might actually be quite complementary to each other. So, and put it more simply, maybe as AI takes care of the more task-oriented things, community is what's most important, right? And
Come on.
not just for social reasons, but also
Yes.
just in creating value, right? AI can take care of all the other stuff, right, around it. Facebook can
Yes.
create communities, but it's not Facebook creating those communities. It's the people that engage in all the
Come
various
on.
subsets you mentioned.
Yes.
And so I think that's something when we try to ask this question of what is AI going to do and what are humans going to do, maybe enclaves and community is exactly where we should be leaning in.
Yes, absolutely.
100%.
Exactly. And I just, that is just powerful. We're going to have another episode on that. Just community building alone. Let's talk about ownership and legacy, because that's another recurring theme you drive home in the book. You make a bold statement that only ownership creates generational wealth. Whew, that was a hit harder for me. One of the ways I simply define leadership is ownership, right? But Dr. John, as someone who's led inside global corporations, why do you believe ownership, not employment, is a true lever of transformation? And listen, disruptors, wherever you are, lean in, because this is the very essence of why I breathe. What he's about to say. I don't know what he's going to say, but I can guess. The lesson he will teach.
No, I when I look at the examples that we use in the book, but more importantly, things that I see, the reality is part of the reason there are some of the extremes of wealth right now. We've had the gap between the rich and the poor is growing. When somebody, protect the innocent now, and say somebody demands $1 trillion pay package, there's something that, you kind of, that's one of those things where you take a step back and say, really? Really? Somebody needs $1 trillion? But the reality is that, he's commanded ownership, and it's driven that's put him in situations that, are pretty unique. We spend a lot of time with venture capital and with private equity. And probably the most obvious thing to us when we did that is when we talk to people, they all, generally speaking, look like me. Right? I mean, the vast majority of people who are distributing the capital to grow that wealth look like old white guys and often give it to old white guys. And I can say that as an old white guy, right?
Right.
I think that has to change. I think we have to look at that lens in a very, very different way. And it's only by driving folks. I think about Lilly. A large proportion of the employee base had, in some way, shape, or form, participation in Lilly stock.
Yes. And
sometimes it wasn't vast, it wasn't a huge amount of stock, but it was still transformative. Lilly over the last 10 years as markets cap has grown tenfold. Well, you don't need that many shares as an administrative assistant or whoever it is for it to be transformative. When I was back in Lilly UK, we had an assistant who, because of one of the stock programs, paid off her mortgage at a relatively young age, right? Those are transformative things for folks. And particularly if you get people engaged in entrepreneurship, these are game-changing events often not just for one generation, but for multiple generations.
Multiple generations.
And we've got to educate all communities on that value.
Absolutely. And not gatekeep it, right? What a conversation. I don't know about you, but I could feel the passion and purpose radiating through every word from Dr. Bamforth and Dr. Zwahlen. Innovation isn't just about tech or startups. It's about mindsets. It's about who we allow to bring their ideas to the table. And we're just getting started. In part 2, we'll dive into ownership, the unique lens diverse innovators bring to the table, and the real mechanics of accelerating transformative change in our communities and corporations. So make sure you're subscribed. Share the episode with someone who believes in building better systems, and get ready because the next half of this conversation takes it to a whole new level. I'm Dr. Alisa White, your #1 mindset disruptor, reminding you to think, speak, do, become, keep mastering your mindset, and I'll see you on part 2. Let's get it.